The Mission 770's MKii are a creation of Peter Como, the same designer of the Lintons, but they cost more than twice as much. Are they worth it? Hello, my dear audiophile. Welcome to another edition of a translation from my main channel, the Audiophilos y Locos. I hope you like this one. This one is pretty good. The original Mission 770 was designed by Farhad Asima in England in the 70s. They were shown in 1977, so 1977, 770s, there's some numerology there. Speaking of numerology, I want to tell you a story about music. If you don't care about music, just you can skip. I can put for you a link where I just talk about the speakers, but I want to tell you a story, okay? The other day I went to a live concert of the Emerson String Quartet, and in this concert, which is actually the last performance of the Emerson Quartet, because they're splitting up, they played a piece by Shostakovich, which is the Quartet number 12. The funny thing is that Shostakovich was also interested in numerology. And Shostakovich was criticized by the Politburo, Stalin, for his music. So he was a rebel, and he thought about this piece, and he thought, how about I just write it in 12-tone duodecaphonic, which is the system that Schoenberg and Berg promoted and others. And in the beginning of the quartet, you can hear a melody that contains all 12 tones of this musical scale. So it sounds like he is rebelling and he's writing in 12-tone style. But then, after a few seconds, when the violin comes in, the cello plays a scale in thirds that becomes more and more tonal. So Shostakovich thought, I want to do it 12-tone, but then the hell with it, I'm going to go with tonal music. He did whatever he wanted, and that's why he became an amazing composer. I recommend Shostakovich, but let me play for you the beginning of this quartet so you can hear what I'm talking about.
Cuando entra el violín, empieza entonces la tonalidad.
The violin starts, then you can hear the tonality, the melody.
Y ahora es la música más tonal, casi
And now
romántica.
it's the most melodic tonal music, almost romantic, almost Beethoven.
¿Y por qué te digo esto? Porque creo que esto es
And
algo
why am I telling you
que
this?
hizo el diseñador
It's
de
because
esta bocina,
It's
Peter
something that
Como,
Peter
que es
Como
la persona que está a cargo
did
del grupo
in his own way,
AIG, que es un conglomerado de
who is in
compañías
charge of design
como Warfdale,
in the
Audiolab.
AGI group, which is a conglomerate
Así que
that owns several
Peter Como
companies like
tuvo la gran
Warfdale, Audiolab,
responsabilidad de revivir
Mission,
este clásico de los
Quad.
años 70, la Mission
and Peter had the big
770.
responsibility of reviving the original 770s, and he had to make a difficult decision to decide how these speakers were going to sound. He also designed the Lintons, which are particularly very Warfelidian sounding. It's a warm sound, it has generous bass. But the thing that's really interesting about the missions, the original ones, Farhad Asima designed them by ear, especially in the crossover. Everything was pretty much done by ear. In the digital age, now you can't really do those things because speakers have to withstand dynamic changes that are more violent. So Peter Como had to use modern techniques to design the new missions and use computer analysis. But he also ended designing the crossover by ear. They had a group that listened to the speakers, and supposedly they listened to up to 174 different versions of the crossover for these speakers. So that's a lot of listening, and it's a big responsibility because the Mission 770s were classic and very, very popular. I was recently reading the review of a stereophile of the missions, and the review was written by the editor of Stereophile, John Atkinson, when the original 770s came out. And also, Peter Como was a reviewer, and he wrote for a different magazine in England, but they both fell in love with the 770s. The original ones. And that's the funny thing. Now, Peter had the responsibility of bringing back the old legend, but John Atkinson also gets to listen to them and review them as the editor of Stereophile. But you want to know something else? These very speakers that John Atkinson listened to at home are the same ones that I have. And also Steve Guttenberg, because they were loaned to me by Anthony Chiarella from Specialty Sound and Vision, who distributes these speakers in New Jersey. So everything that John Atkinson says, it probably should make sense to me, and I should say the same that he said. I should arrive to the same conclusions, right? Because he had exactly the same speakers. Although I don't have the same amplifiers and I don't have the same source. So, interesting. Let's see more about this speaker.
La Mission 770 MK2
Mission 770's MK2 cost around $5,000 today. They come with stands. They're two-way. The stands come fully assembled, were also designed by Peter Como. They're similar to the Linton stands, and it's included in the price of the speakers. It's a bass reflex speaker. The drivers are interesting. The bass driver is polypropylene, which is also mineral loaded. And the tweeter has a soft tone of 1.25 inches. The sensibility is 88 decibels, and amplifiers recommended are 25 to 200 watts. But they can play up to 117 decibels of volume of loudness. That's pretty loud. Impedance is about 8 ohms, but they go down to 6, sometimes to 4.
John Atkinson
did something in this review that was kind of similar to my review, which is when something sounds really good, you don't really want to describe it in a way that's typical. And I don't know, but maybe I'm not good enough for this channel, because I have trouble describing the sound of the speakers too, and I'm a musician and I know how music sounds. But one thing that he said is that he can just sit there and talk about treble and bass, because the overall experience was a huge musical feel. But I can tell you that I never listened to the originals, and although these are supposed to look alike, my phone rang there. But these are a new design. They're not really exactly the same as the original ones, but they do maintain the idea of having that woofer with the polypropylene and mica and marble to make the woofer a little bit harder, more rigid. And that's something that the original Mission 770s did. They were the first ones, and then you had all the speakers like Infinity and some Canadian speakers like Paradigm that had these polypropylene woofers or copies of it. I would say that the sound of the speaker, it's a very free and non-congested sound.
Digamos que las
they don't really sound
en comparación
like the
son
way they
bocinas
look.
que suenan como
Let's
tú
say that
esperarías
if
que
you compare
sonaran
to the
unas
Lintons,
bocinas grandes
the
así
Lintons
de
sound
caja,
sort of the way you
son
expect
booming
big
y
speakers to
tienen
sound. They're a little
impacto
bit
y
boomy
tienen
and
mucho
they have a lot of
bajo
impact and they have a lot of
y
bass
suenan un poquito a la
and
antigua, de la vieja
they
escuela.
sound kind of
Estas
old-fashioned.
bocinas, lo más curioso es que cuando tú las
But
ves, lo primero que quieres
these
poner es
speakers
rock.
are funny
Quieres
because the
poner rock
first time you
inglés,
see them, you just want to play
quieres
rock.
poner
You want to
Queen,
play
quieres
Pink
poner
Floyd, Queen,
todo tipo
Eric
de
Clapton.
y esas cosas.
You think that
Pero lo
they're
más
just gonna rock.
es que suenan
But what really
excelente
surprised
con
me
música
is how
clásica.
great they
¿Por
sound
qué?
with
Porque
classical and
tienen muy
orchestral
poca
music.
coloración,
Because they
tienen
have
un
so
sonido
little
muy
coloration
abierto.
and they're very
No
open
son
sounding.
booming. Y
They're
eso
not booming.
engaña, porque al principio,
And that
y
fools you.
dependiendo de la amplificación, te dan la impresión de que
Also, in
tienen
the
poco
beginning,
bajo,
depending on the
pero
amplifier,
tienen
they
muchísimos
feel like they
graves.
don't
De
have a
hecho,
lot of
los
bass,
graves
but
que
they
tienen
actually
son
have
sus
incredible,
graves. Yo digo que
incredible
no
bass,
necesitan un subwoofer.
even
Lo
sub
que pasa
bass.
es que
I
el
would say they
bajo
don't need a
es
subwoofer.
suave. No
It's
es
just that the bass
impactante.
is soft.
No
It's
golpea
not.
como podría
It doesn't
hacerlo
kick you in the
en otro
nuts.
tipo de
It's
bocinas
not
dinámicas.
super
Por
aggressive.
supuesto, esto fue
It's
una
very
decisión
controlled,
que tomó
the bass.
Peter Como al diseñar
And
la
of
bocina.
course, Peter
Pero
Como had
yo
to
creo
make
que
these
lo
decisions
bueno que
when he
tiene
designed the
eso es que
speaker.
las bocinas no fatigan.
But the
Tuve la
great thing about
oportunidad
the
de
speakers
escuchar
is that
estas
they don't
bocinas con
fatigue
una
your
gran
ears.
variedad de amplificadores,
I tried a
desde mi
bunch of
Almagro de
amplifiers.
5 vatios por canal,
My Almagro, my 5-watt
el
amplifier,
Passlabs XA25 y también
my
el
Passlabs X25, and Passlabs
150.8.
150.8.
Ahora, me pareció que con el
And my audio note.
150.8 que ves ahí,
With my
hicieron el
150.8,
mejor
I feel like it
emparejamiento,
wasn't the
porque ese
best
amplificador es demasiado
coupling
transparente y
because that
demasiado
amplifier is
liviano.
very transparent and very lightweight.
Más
Even though it has a lot of power, it doesn't have an
Así que,
incredible
por
bass.
suerte, tuve
So,
la oportunidad de tener
but
al
I was
Diablo
lucky to have
300, que aquellos
the
que conocen bien
the
el
Griffon
canal ya lo han visto.
Diablo
Muchos de
300.
los
To those who
cortos
know my
que he hecho
channel
en el
have seen
canal,
it
si no
a
has
few
visto,
times. I did a
te
bunch of
exhorto a que lo
short
busques.
videos
Ahí
with demos in
buscas
them.
pruebas
You
de
can
sonido
listen with
del
headphones
Diablo 300
binaurally,
con diferentes bocinas.
and you can hear them with
Pero
different
a la
speakers.
verdad
That
que
amplifier,
estas bocinas
Diablo.
con el Diablo 300
But these
son una
speakers
cosa
with the Diablo
fantástica,
300
magnífica.
was quite a
Porque
tour de
no
force.
son
It
unas
was
bocinas diminutas,
magnificent.
pero tampoco son bocinas
Because they're not tiny
gigantescas.
speakers,
Y
but
estas
they're also
bocinas
not
creo que
gigantic,
valen la
and they
pena
fill the
por
room with
la
3D
transparencia
sound.
que traen a tu
The
hogar,
soundstage was very
por,
wide,
la
transparency,
poca coloración que traen.
and the
Además
very
de que
low
son
coloration.
magníficas, en términos de
You
diseño se ven muy
you would
bonitas.
expect them to
Pero
have
otra
more
cosa que me gusta
boominess
en el sonido
for the
es que
looks.
el treble no es cansón.
And also the thing about the treble
No
is that
fatigan,
it's not aggressive,
no son
it's not
súper
fatiguing,
brillantes,
they're
ni
not
son
super bright,
penetrantes, pero
or
tampoco le
penetrating,
falta treble. Es
but they
difícil de
don't
explicar,
need any more
porque
treble. It's
creo que
not
han
like they
logrado
sound
un
dark.
balance muy
He's
bueno.
found a very
Ya,
good
pues, voy a
balance,
empezar a
Peter,
hablar de
with
las
this
quads, porque
design.
cuando hablo de
Of course, I'm
bocinas,
going to start
hablo de
talking about
cajas,
quads now, because
porque
those are
tienen
my
poca
favorites.
coloración,
Whenever I
empiezo a
say
pensar en
something
mis
doesn't
queridas
sound like
quads.
speakers, I talk about quads.
Mejor
So
me callo.
I better shut up.
Yo creo que
I think
ninguna bocina
that
vale la pena escuchar si
no
son
speaker
capaces de
is worth
reproducir
listening to
unos rangos medios
if
buenos y naturales.
the mid-range
Nada
really,
vale que tus
it's
bocinas
not
tengan
that
buen bajo,
realistic or
que tus
that
bocinas
present.
tengan buen treble,
It's not worth it.
si
I mean,
no
it doesn't
tienen,
matter if the speaker has
buenos
good
rangos
bass
medios.
or good treble.
Y de
If
ahí
it doesn't
vienen
have a good
muchas
mid-range,
fórmulas,
then
que he venido,
they're not gonna stay in your house for very long. And many formulas of speakers have
que traían unos
sold before
unos satélites
using the
pequeñitos,
V-shape
un
formula,
subwoofer,
like Bose, for
y
example.
no tenía muchos
Bose
rangos
used the
medios,
Acoustimas
pero
satellite
había mucho bombo y
subwoofer.
platillo, y
It
eso a la
was,
gente le
you
gusta.
know, it was a lot of
Pero
pomp and
te
circumstance,
fatiga.
but not
Una bocina que
mid-range.
es capaz
And they
de
fatigue you. They fatigue you
fielmente
because they were
rangos
bright
medios
and
y
booming.
naturalmente se
But
van
if
a
you have a
quedar en tu
speaker
casa.
that can reproduce mid-range naturally in your home, they
Ahí
will
está
stay
la gran
in your
ventaja
home
de las
for a
bocinas.
much longer time.
Tienen unos
And that's the
rangos medios
advantage of the missions.
muy,
They have a phenomenal
muy
mid-range
convincentes,
presentation,
muy
very
bien
natural,
realizados,
very wide
y hacen que te
soundstage,
quedes sentado
and very convincing, and they make you stay on your chair.
Si quieres saber más de aspectos técnicos,
If you want to know
hay
more
muchos
about
canales,
technical details
especialmente
of
en
these
inglés.
speakers,
Recientemente Darko le hizo
there are a lot of
bocinas,
channels
habla de
that are
la
reviewing
historia.
them and giving you a
También
lot of
entrevistó
info.
a Peter
Darko did a
Como.
great review
Ustedes saben,
recently.
los que conocen el canal también, y que yo
Uh,
entrevisté a Peter Como
So
con
those who know my
relación a,
channel know that I
Linton.
interviewed Peter
Pero
Como to
pensé
talk
que
about the
quizás,
Lintons,
no iba a ser tan
but
provechoso que lo
I didn't want to
entrevistara
talk to
para
him
esto,
about the
porque haría
speakers
videos
because I
más
thought
largos. Yo sé que
I don't want to make my videos longer. A lot of people don't like
Así que vamos
that
a
I
hablar
ramble
en
on
breve.
so much.
Y te digo que
So
estas bocinas,
I can just say that these speakers have really made a big impression in my house, and I've loved them. And I would like to keep them a little longer, but I do have to return them to Anthony. So if you're looking for speakers on this range, I tell you they're really good candidates, but you do have to get the right kind of amplifier. An amplifier that's not too analytical and not too lightweight in sound, because they're very revealing. I would say something a little more heavy duty, like a Bryston or a PS Audio or a tube amp, something that gives those drivers a workout, so they sound warm and beautiful as they can do. They're very powerful, especially in the bass. They just need an amplifier that can really control those woofers. Peter Como had to decide. He had a chance to revise this product, the original one, and make a speaker that was for rock and roll or to make noise or play popular music. But he had the vision to make something very refined, something that yes can play rock, but can also play the most refined orchestral and chamber music or jazz. They are multifaceted, and you can enjoy a big variety of colors because of their transparency, depending on the material. So thanks to Peter Como for making a decision that only an adult could have taken. Everything I can say about the speakers is that I recommend it, but let's wait for the goosebump meter. I want to thank Anthony of Specialty Sound and Vision for loaning me these speakers, which also John Atkinson and Steve Gothenberg had. I feel honored to share them with him. And also thank you, Anthony, for loaning me the Griffon Diablo 300, which I will talk to you about very soon. Thanks for watching my channel, and if you think I deserve a like, or if I deserve your subscription, go for it. And you can consider joining Patreon on my main channel. If you want recommendations for equipment to buy, visit my page, theaudiophilos.com, where I have some kits that I recommend for things you can get for your system.